I want to do a video about the spirits that guide us. I'm getting ready to drive to Pennsylvania to see my Grammy. It's likely it's for the last time, and she has dementia and has fell and hurt herself a bunch of times and is not doing great. But I want to get into that because my pap, who died, it's been at least 10-15 years ago, he was a spirit guide in my life, and I didn't even understand that until years after his death, when I had my enlightenment or spiritual awakening or whatever you call it. I call it a rebirth. So what happened was, after my rebirth, I was sitting in my chair where I do my writing. I do a lot of writing at night, a couple hours if I can. And in front of me is a picture of me at 15 years old when I visited Tulum in Mexico. Now, I took a trip there, and it was a random chance I went there. My sister's cheerleading coach actually was the one who invited me. So I was on this trip to the Yucatan, and we visited all the big sites first, like Chichen Itza, which is, I felt something powerful there. It was a very cool place. I got to climb the big pyramid. I think they've closed that off now. And then finally we went to, the last stop was in Tulum, which is another Mayan ruin in an ancient Mayan city. And in Tulum, that was the first time I ever saw the Caribbean Sea. So I get there and I see these iguanas, and I feel like they're telling me to kind of follow them, right? So I start following them down onto these rocks, and I come to this place that is just amazing. This beautiful view of the Caribbean Sea. And I felt God's presence fully for the first time in my life. I was so awestruck. My knees were getting weak. I had to sit on a rock that was right behind me, and I just sat there for, I don't even know how long. It felt like not long enough, but I'm sure it was a while. And while I was sitting there and feeling God's presence, I didn't know what he was saying to me at the time. I didn't figure that out until many, many years later, really like 20 years later. So I was sitting there watching the ocean and just feeling this amazing presence, this divine presence. And the teacher that I was with came up and took a picture. And that picture, she called to me, and I looked back at her, and she took the picture, and she said that she just saw this amazing view and saw me sitting there with this look on my face like she'd never seen before. And she said that was her favorite picture from the entire trip. So she gave it to my parents when we got back. My parents made copies of it, gave it to all the grandparents. Well, my pap, he got that picture. He got all the pictures from Tulum, and all of my Mexico pictures. But that picture specifically stood out to him. So he went and he made 2 poster-size blow-ups of this picture of me sitting on this rock above the Caribbean. And he kept one for himself, and he gave one to my parents. Well, my parents had one hanging in their home since, and when he died, the picture came down because we were selling their house and moving my Grammy into my parents' house at the time. And I remember we went up there to kind of help out a little bit with getting all the stuff that we wanted from my grandparents' house. And I guess, I don't know exactly what the conversation was, but my wife and my mom were talking about that picture, and my mom gave it to my wife, who brought it home with us And then one day when I got home from work, a couple weeks later, I saw that picture was framed and hanging on the wall. And it was right where I always sit down in the basement. This was before my back injury, but it's been there for a long time. That picture hung there for, I want to say, probably 15, 20 years, maybe 15 years, I guess. And I always loved that picture, obviously, because that was such an amazing time. Not until my rebirth did I even notice, and did it even occur to me that was the time when God appeared to me the clearest. So I was, one night after my rebirth, I was sitting there, and it just dawned on me, and I felt my grandfather's presence. And I felt, it all just occurred to me that he looked at that picture and he saw that I was feeling the presence of God in that moment. And he loved it so much, he blew it up and he made 2 big posters out of it. And one of them has been sitting in front of my face for all these years, and I never even thought about it twice. I just thought it was a great picture. It was the first time I saw the Caribbean, so it meant so much to me. That was when I started to realize that my pap had some kind of spiritual sense that, of course, he was a man's man. He never let on that he had this kind of spiritual sense, because most people don't. I know I've always had that spiritual sense, not maybe as strong as some others, but I never let anybody know about it unless I was kind of joking around about it and not being serious. That spiritual sense can make you sound like a lunatic. It really can. And if you start telling people, this animal spoke to me, or this tree was telling me something, or God visited me in the woods today, or you don't tell people that in just polite conversation. That's maybe something you're sitting down having some drinks or some herbal plant medicine, it might come up. But the thing is, so hold 1 second here. Okay, I had to let these people pass, but I wanted to get to the most profound story of how I came to know that my pap was a spiritual guide in my life, a spiritual guiding force in my life. And so I take my dogs for a walk just about every day. And a lot of times I'll take them to a little pond that's in the neighborhood right near us. And I have a lab mix, and he likes to go and stand in the water, because he doesn't swim because his hips are all bad and everything, but he loves to stand in that water and just feel like a lab. That's what labs do. They love the water. And he's also part Akita, which is kind of a spiritual dog from Japan. So he's like a water spirit dog. And I have a hound dog, pit bull mix, and he's dumb as a brick but lovable, and I love him so much. But they're polar opposite dogs. So anyway, we're going up to this pond, and we're walking up there, and I always have my playlist on, my music list, and this music list, it starts playing right before I get to this. There's a little hill you have to cross before you get to this pond. It starts playing this song called "The Cry of the Wild Goose." It's this old song, and it used to be my pap's favorite song. And out of all hundreds and hundreds of songs on this playlist, that song starts playing. So we get up to the pond, and there's geese and ducks everywhere. My pap was a huge lover of ducks and geese, but especially Canadian geese. And he had paintings of geese and carvings of them all over. And "The Cry of the Wild Goose" was his favorite song. And he would always listen to it, and he'd always listen to it, and it was just his favorite song. So this song, his favorite song, starts playing. I get to the pond where I see all these geese, and you have to understand my dogs, they're trained, but they're not that trained, right? So if they see geese and ducks, there hasn't been a time I can ever remember where they just haven't gone nuts and just tried to pull me into the water, just going nuts trying to get to those geese, right? That's especially the lab, that's in their blood. They have to go get that goose, It's just what they're bred for. So we get there, and I'm tightening up the leashes because I'm like, oh God, here goes my dog's going to jump in the water and just try to get these ducks and geese. But they didn't. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, what is going on here? And I felt that presence again. It wasn't as strong as when I was in Tulum, because I believe that was God visiting me. That was the strongest I've ever felt God's presence. But it was a very strong feeling. And so the geese started looking at us, and then they slowly just started swimming over to us. And I was like, oh man, the dogs are going to go nuts here. They didn't. My dog stood there as calm as could be. My lab jumped, he walked into the water, and he stood there. And these Canadian geese, they swam back and forth real slowly right in front of us. And my dog he had a look on his face. He was just closing his eyes and looking up in the air. And he was at such peace. My hound dog was sitting there just watching, probably not knowing what the hell's going on. He's probably got the little monkeys clapping the cymbals in his brain half the time, just like I do. So, just like me. But excuse me. So we're sitting there watching these geese go back and forth, and I could feel that this was my Pap-Pap, and I could feel him communicating with me and telling me everything was going to be fine now. He'd been watching over me, and he'd been watching over the whole family. And unfortunately, he was a man's man, and he was a pillar of the family. A lot of spiritual people who have their enlightenment are the ones who keep their family together, because they are so strong and they can stay calm. And he was just a transcended person, but didn't show it, because when you're spiritual, a lot of times you don't have to show it. That's something between you and God. That's something you don't have to sit there and brag about. I don't tell a lot of people unless it comes up naturally in a conversation, which somehow it does now. I guess I'm drawn to more spiritual people a lot of times, but if I think somebody will benefit from my story, then I tell it. But that's between me and God and my family, and it's more of a private thing. It really is. So I could feel my grandfather talking to me, and I got tears in my eyes, and we sat there, and the song, The Cry of the Wild Goose, it ended, and slowly they just swam away, and my lab had a big smile on his face, and he looked over at me, and that was it. We went home. So I came home, and I told my wife and my girls about it. And my oldest daughter, she said to me, she was like, "Can I go see that too?" And I was like, well, I don't know if that's not really how miracles work. That's not how it works a lot of times, but we can go there and see what happens. A lot of times I'm usually only visited when I'm by myself, but I think, hopefully my daughter will see something great. So the next day I took her with me to the pond. I kid you not, it was a little bit earlier this time, but that same song came on. Out of hundreds of songs, that song came on again. And so we listened to it, and I tell her that was Pap-Pap's favorite song, and that was the song that came on before. We walk up the hill, and we see the pond. And again, my dogs do the exact same thing. My dog stands in the water, my lab. My pit bull stands on land because he doesn't want to get his paws wet half the time. And the geese came over and started swimming back and forth in front of us. And I was like, do you see, Madison? I was like, my daughter's name's Madison. I was like, do you see? And she just had this big smile on her face. And I was like, I just said, thank you, Pap, thank you. And that wasn't the end, okay? So I know this story's getting long, but it's very important. So we see that. This happens. The geese swim away at the end. We go back home. Madison is just amazed. So a couple weeks later, or about a week or so later, we are at this other park, and it's a pool and park in Raleigh. It's a very nice park, but we went and we were just walking around the pond they have there, and Madison goes, do you think that Pap will come visit us today? And I was like, I don't know, Madison. I was like, we can't ever tell when God or a spirit's going to visit us. We just have to let it happen. And I said, well, let's go stand by the pond and see. And there was probably a couple dozen people around this pond, right? So, and there's ducks and geese that live there, but they're all completely across the other side of the pond, right? Me and Madison go stand there, and a pair of Canadian geese swim from the other side of the pond where somebody was actually feeding them. They swim all the way to us, of all the people, all the people that are in there, all the way to us, and start swimming back and forth right in front of us as calmly as could be. And I was just like, thank you so much, Pap. Now, kind of the end of that story was, I went back to that pond one more time, and I talked to him, and I told him, thank you so much. God is guiding me now, and I see that, and I'm ready to be the guide for my family now. And I said that Grammy needs you more than ever right now. So please just go be with Grammy and look after her. I know he already was, but I was like, I will see you. You'll know when I need you, and I will see you soon. And that was the last time I really felt his spirit really strongly. And it was just incredible because I could feel the happiness. I could feel the happiness that I was ready to finally take the torch from him and try to be a pillar for the family and try to be that rock that my family needs. Now, I know I've gone a long time in this. This was a lot for you, Rachel. I really do think that it's one of the most important stories of my life. The fact that I found out Pap was guiding me this whole time, and he's been guiding all of us and looking after all of us. And now he's with Grammy in her time of need. And whenever she's ready to go to him, he will be there waiting with open arms. God bless you all.